you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast, dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
What's up, you guys, and welcome to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Cynthia, and welcome to another week listening to more episodes by your girl. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Mine was pretty chill. I had a girls' night with one of my friends. She recently moved back to the Sacramento area where we're from, and she got a new apartment. So we went over and, just basically drank a little bit of wine. We made shrimp tacos, super chill night. But I was definitely paying for it the next morning because I had to wake up early to train a couple clients. And I don't normally drink wine. So when I do, I kind of get like a slight headache the next day, even if it's like not that much that I drink. And I failed to keep up with my water intake that night that I was drinking wine. So I did wake up with a slight headache Sunday, which resulted in me just being extremely lazy and groggy for the rest of the day. So this is why I tend to avoid drinking altogether, because I just hate the way I feel the following day. I feel so lazy, so unproductive. I'm definitely not how I used to be in my college days. Girl, I would have to go to work, show up to work 6 a.m. I would be taking double shots of tequila until 3 a.m. and then go to work like that. My body's not built that way anymore. I have grown. I have matured. I am a responsible adult with real big girl responsibilities, and I just can't be letting alcohol affect me in that way, right? I know many of you right now listening feel me on that. But anyway, regardless, really chill weekend. However, I don't know if you guys have seen on social media or, I don't know, Facebook, wherever you catch up on your media. If you saw in New York Times, or it was posted from the New York Times, where the post that I saw, but in Union, I believe it's Times Square in New York, they posted like a 7-year countdown, basically, a 7-year deadline that we have until climate change is irreversible. So we have from now until then to really get our act together and really come together and create big changes that can ultimately, give us more time here and enjoy all of the beautiful resources that Earth has to offer to us. And when that clock went viral, a lot of people were posting it, reposting it on their stories. Even I did. And I failed to realize, or I didn't think it would affect me as deep as it did. Ever since that 7-year countdown was posted, I have not been able to sleep. That is the last thing I think about when my head lays on my pillow, and it gives me major anxiety. And climate anxiety is actually a real thing, which we'll get into in another episode. So I have that. And for all of my new listeners tuning in, I deal with generalized anxiety disorder, which is just it's in the name, generalized anxiety disorder. It's the most common under the umbrella of anxiety. And I get really, really aggressive and fast heart palpitations when my anxiety gets really bad. And that's how it's been every single night for like the last 4 nights. Like I've had sleepless nights. Palpitations have been kicking in like crazy. I sometimes even feel nauseous. Like anxiety can literally just physically give you all of these crazy symptoms. And I know for my people who deal with anxiety, you understand where I'm coming from. But I like was getting nauseous. I was tossing and turning all night. I would literally wake up in the middle of the night like gasping for air, like because I was feeling those palpitations like through my chest, like it was creating chest pain. And it's just like a cycle that I have been dealing with, and I was fine for a while. And again, once that 7-year countdown was announced, that has been the last thing resting on my mind every single night for the last few days. And it's like I really feel things deeply. I think it's like a blessing and a curse, you know, like I'm a true empath, not even towards people, but also towards like earth. Like when I feel the earth is hurting, I physically feel those symptoms. And I know it sounds crazy, and some of you are like, girl, what are you talking about? Like, you sound crazy. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel it. I don't know if it's because I'm a Cancer, but I feel things very deeply. So like when things aren't going great, when the world is in shambles as it is now, I feel those things really deeply. Like it really takes a deep toll on me. And I think it has affected me more than I would have liked it to. So I purchased, or my mom, I should say, my mom purchased a weighted blanket for me. And I've heard of weighted blankets before. I have a friend who she would always post on her stories that, like, if you don't have a weighted blanket, what are you doing? It's the best thing ever. I've been sleeping so much better. And this friend of mine who always is like posting about her blanket, she also deals with generalized anxiety such as myself. And my mom also does too. So my mom bought this blanket for the purpose of her and I to share it. But especially since I've been just like having sleepless, awful nights the last like 4 or 5 nights, she's like, let's give this a try and, you know, see how you feel. So I used the weighted blanket for the first time last night, and I felt so good. I felt so warm and like cradled and fuzzy and just comfortable. It was like a nice deep pressure, but not suffocating. And I had such a good night's sleep. I had to wake up at 4 a.m. this morning, and I like woke up almost, and I know it sounds crazy, but I woke up almost feeling refreshed. And I know that's hard to believe, especially waking up at the crack of dawn, 4 a.m. Like, who does that, you know? So I actually didn't feel that exhausted when I woke up in the morning. I like woke up, was like, all right, let's get ready for the day. Like, time to teach these classes. And I like just stared back at my blanket. I'm like, I'll be back for you. I'm meeting you later tonight. You feel me? Like, we have a date every night. So that is my first experience with a weighted blanket. And I'm so thankful that my mom purchased one for us to use, because I am going to be using her every single night. I've tried other methods to try and calm my anxiety at nighttime, because that's really when mine hits, is like at night. And I've done CBD, and CBD works for a while. Like the first week or so of me taking CBD drops, I feel really calm and like I'm able to sleep. I even have like very vivid dreams. But I feel that my body gets used to the dose that I'm taking, or I don't know what it is. But then after a week of taking CBD, like it doesn't really make any difference to me. And especially, you know, paying $80 for a little bottle of CBD drops, it's expensive. CBD's up there, you know, it's pricey. So I've kind of let go of CBD, and I have tried other things. Like I've tried like listening to sound baths every night, but then my AirPods would die. And like, I don't know. So far, this weighted blanket has been my favorite thing to use. And I know I've only used it once, but literally, you guys, I was like in such a deep sleep. Like my body and my mind were truly at rest. And it just felt amazing. Like I felt so good when I woke up this morning, and I haven't felt that way in quite some time. So weigh me down, literally. That's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. We're going to talk about weighted blankets. Do they work? What are their benefits? And really, like, how does it work? Like, what's the research? What's the science behind weighted blankets? Because I was a little skeptical at first too, but it makes sense once you try it and you're like, oh, like, this feels amazing. Your body's just so relaxed. And we're going to get into all that right after this commercial break.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. So as I mentioned in the previous segment, we're going to be discussing all about weighted blankets. Where did it originate from? Who invented it? What are the immediate effects? And the science behind a weighted blanket and all of its benefits. So for many people, weighted blankets have become a routine part of stress relief and healthy sleep habits, and for a good reason. Research suggests weighted blankets may benefit people with anxiety, autism, and insomnia, among many other conditions. And I actually read that the autism community is really the main reason how all of this started. It originated with that community. And these weighted blankets, they're basically like therapeutic blankets that weigh between 5 to 30 pounds, anywhere from that range. The blanket that I have is 15 pounds, and it's perfect. The pressure from the extra weight mimics a therapeutic technique called deep pressure stimulation. And basically what deep pressure stimulation is it uses hands-on pressure to relax the nervous system. That's what deep pressure stimulation is. And by doing so, that may help relieve pain, lessen anxiety, improve mood, and many other things. And I know I said that it uses hands-on pressure to relax the nervous system, but deep pressure stimulation doesn't have to be completely hands-on, right? That's where weighted blankets come. The same pressure comes from having the blanket wrapped around the body. And deep pressure stimulation has shown to be an effective part of other treatments, including massage therapy and the use of support animals. So I'm going to just quickly talk about, the immediate effects of deep pressure stimulation and how this has affected people with like autism and other severe intellectual difficulties. So again, deep pressure is widely used by occupational therapists for people with autism spectrum disorders. Like I mentioned, that is really where it originated from with this community. And we're going to take a little bit of time right now before we get into the next topic to kind of like evaluate the immediate effects of deep pressure on people with autism and other, intellectual disabilities. So I'm trying to find my notes here. So deep pressure as I mentioned, it's been described as hands-on pressure, but it can also be defined as the sensation produced when an individual is hugged, squeezed, stroked, or held. And I mean, who doesn't like a big hug, honestly? I know there's people out there who are like, oh, I'm not a hugger. Like, yes, you are. You're just being weird and you don't want to hug, or like you're not comfortable hugging that specific person, which is fine. But who doesn't like hugs? Like, who doesn't like that? It doesn't make sense. And again, that sensation is being produced by the weighted blanket, that sensation of an individual feeling hugged, squeezed, held. And it's widely used by occupational therapists working with children with autism spectrum disorders, and is thought to be rewarding, reducing symptoms of stress and anxiety, and even, improving performance in school. Deep pressure is based on sensory integration theory, as initially developed by Ayres in the 1960s and 1970s. The use of deep pressure for individuals with autism spectrum disorders has been widely discussed since Temple Grandin described her self-designed machine, which is a hug machine, for giving her the pressure sensations that she craved. Other types of deep pressure therapy include, of course, the weighted blankets. There's even like weighted garments like jackets, holding, stroking, hugging, squeezing, and therapeutic brushing. So you don't even need to, buy an expensive blanket or buy an expensive, machine, a hug machine. Like literally, physically, just giving someone a hug for free can help, deeply, deeply help. A number of reviews have concluded that sensory integration has insufficient evidence for therapeutic and educational use unless it is carefully evaluated. So, with all of this being said, just to reiterate what I've already been saying, this concept of deep pressure stimulation is already very popular. But the idea of implementing this concept into a blanket, not so common, and has recently exploded in popularity, these weighted blankets. And they're being used therapeutically for a variety of issues, including sensory processing disorder, anxiety, depression, autism, insomnia, ADHD, and simply just getting a better night's sleep. In short, the blankets use deep pressure touch simulation therapy, which is similar to that of swaddling a baby. And while light touches can alert the nervous system, deep pressure, like a deep tissue massage or, like a very strong hug, can have a relaxing, calming effect on the body. Yet, despite the recent hype surrounding this concept and myriad companies touting their versions, the first commercially available weighted blanket has been around for actually over 20 years. And that one still may be the best I've heard. I don't know. Mine's not the OG weighted blanket, but that's exactly how we're going to be talking about right now. We're going to talk about who is the creator of the original weighted blanket. So the original weighted blanket, which is called the Magic Weighted Blanket, was invented by California native Keith Zivalich in 1998. And I'm going to now walk you guys through an interview that he did with Good Life Report. And in this interview, he talks about how he came up with the idea for a weighted blanket, and just basically the concept and how he transmitted that concept of deep pressure stimulation into a blanket. So here we go. How did he come up with the idea for the weighted blanket and when? As I mentioned, in 1997, he was driving on a family vacation and his daughter, who was about 10 at the time, put a beanie baby named Pugsley on his shoulder to keep him company while he drove. And he noticed how the weight of the stuffed animal made it hug his shoulder. And he thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a blanket filled with the same beanies, not really beanies, but you guys, kind of like a beanbag chair, but like not actual beans. Anyway, so he was thinking that, like, from the weight of the stuffed animal, he's thinking, wouldn't it be cool if there was a blanket that felt like this? It would be, a blanket that hugs you back, basically. And he immediately thought he would call this new type of blanket a beanie blanket originally. That's what it was going to be called, a beanie blanket. And at the time, there was no such thing as a weighted blanket. His wife made a prototype beanie blanket, and he showed it to his neighbors who had small children. And they all looked at it kind of perplexed and said they probably wouldn't use this on their kids. And he had also shown it to a family friend who was a special needs teacher. And she took it to her class. The special needs teacher took it to her class and used it with their students. And that night, the teacher told Keith Zivalich that she needed more beanie blankets, like a lot more. So after hearing how the blanket helped these children with special needs and other intellectual, physical disabilities, he knew the idea was going to be huge and that he needed to protect it. So around 2002, he decided to file a patent. So not having the money to hire a patent attorney, he filed the application himself. And after a year or so, he got a call from the patent examiner who informed him that the application was not unique enough and was being denied. He thanked, the patent examiner, and he hung up. Then in 2018, he came up with another new product idea. And then this time he hired a patent attorney. And the attorney had warned Keith Zivalich that the most patent applications were denied the first time around because they want you to argue its uniqueness. The patent for his new idea, like the weighted blanket idea, was denied for not being unique enough. And this time, he said that they argued and demonstrated that it was, in fact, unique, and a patent was granted. So had he done that for the weighted blanket, he said, he was almost positive that he would have a patent on that as well. So that was really kind of how the whole concept started, was all thanks to this stuffed animal, Pugsley, that was resting on his shoulder. So shout out to his 10-year-old daughter who introduced him to Pugsley and gave him that epiphany of creating a weighted blanket. We're going to cut into a very brief break, and when we come back, more on Keith Zivalich and his interview.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hey guys, welcome back to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. So we're just going to get straight into it, and we're going to continue on discussing in greater detail of how the creator of the weighted blanket, Keith Zivelich, what was the behind-the-scenes process of creating this amazing product. So the next question in the interview was anyone talking about the concept of weighted blankets back when you had your aha moment? And Keith Zivelich said that not only was no one talking about weighted blankets at the time, no one had ever heard of a weighted blanket. He was calling the idea a beanie blanket, since it was the first, he called his new business the Original Beanie Blanket Company. That was the OG name. And he sold his first blanket, he remembers, in December 8th, 1998 to a friend in Idaho. And this was to establish interstate commerce. Having done that, he then applied for a trademark. He was later contacted by Thai corporation lawyers who sent him a cease and desist letter letting him know that he could not use the word beanie. So he shortened the official corporate name to the Original Bean Blanket Company. He then searched for and finally found a company who was willing to make blankets, for his company. And with 6 or so professionally made bean blankets in hand, he set up a small table at a local swap meet. And there was lots of interest in his heavy blankets, but none were sold. Undaunted, he taught himself basic HTML skills and made his first e-commerce site. Next, he made small signs that could paste on the off-ramps of freeways near his home and read, need a hug. And, that's an awesome attention grabber. Like, if you read that off the highway, you're like, need a hug? Like, what? And from that sign, that led to sale of his second blanket and then the start of his e-commerce entrepreneurship, selling online. So the next question they asked was, what is the general concept behind a weighted blanket, and why does more weight on our bodies help us relax and fall asleep quicker, relieve anxiety? How and why? The weight of the blanket on the body, he says, creates a physiological reaction, similar to when a newborn baby is swaddled. This compression has a naturally common effect and is why our special needs teacher would often tightly hug her students to calm them down. Many of her students were autistic and or had sensory processing disorder. These children often could not feel their own bodies in space, which caused them to be constantly on the move and constantly just moving. This movement helped them to feel their body, and it was also disruptive and a detriment to learning and socializing. Known as proprioceptive input, the weight of the blanket helped send a signal to their brain, letting them know that they could now feel their bodies when under the heavy blanket. This helped them to stop fidgeting and to relax. The feeling of being hugged is pleasant to everybody, not just to those, with special needs. When people, especially those with feelings of anxiety, get under a weighted blanket, the chemical, in our brain called serotonin is released in the body. And this neurotransmitter creates a feeling of well-being and happiness. It's why so many people actually enjoy the lead vest as a dentist. It's why a hug feels good. And it's this feeling that helps to calm the mind and body and, as a result, promote deeper sleep. Research shows that deep pressure therapy, the principle that weighted blanks are designed around, stimulates a cycle of reducing cortisol, which is a stress hormone, increasing the production of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that affects mood, digestion, and sleep, and eventually melatonin, which is called the sleep hormone. So it's all kind of, interconnected. And according to Applied Behavior Analysis, edu.org, an independent online resource for applied behavior analysts, when you apply deep pressure to the body switches from running its sympathetic nervous system to its parasympathetic nervous system. This is a so-called switch from fight or flight to rest and digest. When the parasympathetic nervous system takes over, your heart rate slows, muscles relax, and circulation improves. Your body produces endorphins, which are the happy hormones that make you feel amazing after a good run. As deep pressure is applied to the body, the parasympathetic nervous system comes online, calming you and bringing a sense of well-being. In tandem with this change comes a release of dopamine and serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitters of the brain. These hormones help with motivation, impulse control, attention, memory, social behavior, sleep, and digestion. Results of a study published in the Journal of the Formosan Medical Association showed that participants undergoing wisdom tooth removal, which researchers identified as one of the most stressful medical procedures. I wouldn't know because I have not gotten my wisdom teeth pulled out. I probably should though, because my mouth do be getting sore here and there. So participants undergoing wisdom tooth removal who wore weighted blankets during the procedure had more activity in the part of the nervous system that is in control during times of low stress. So pretty hefty amount of information I just threw at you guys. So in conclusion, it is the research behind deep pressure therapy. That principle is how the weighted blanket was designed and introduced to the world, and that's how it works. Other question. Final question that we'll be discussing between the interviewer and Keith Zivelich. And the question is, weighted blankets, clothes, and other weighted accessories have become very popular as a common technique for children with sensory processing disorder, autistic spectrum disorders, and even ADHD. Why is that? And Keith Zivilich's answer is, it all comes back to the hug and compression, what we've been talking about this whole time. And it's why, as newborns, we come out of a warm and safe environment inside the womb into a cold and overstimulating new world and immediately start to cry. Once, we are swaddled and made to feel safe and comforted again, we slowly start to adapt to our new world. Weighted therapy blankets have the same effect. The warmth and gentle compression signals the release of serotonin and other neurotransmitters, which then enable us to enjoy a calming and tranquil cool down from a hard day. Autism researcher Temple Grandin was a pioneer of compression therapy, which she first observed being used when cows were held in place to receive their vaccinations. She noticed that when the cows were gently squeezed, they became calmer and docile. Dr. Grandin remembered how, as a child who herself had sensory processing disorder, being held or hugged often eased her anxiety, but other times she felt confined or restricted. The therapy tools she developed worked by applying firm but gentle pressure throughout the body. Scientific studies have shown that such gentle contact stimulates the release of oxytocin, which is often called the hug or cuddle hormone produced by the hypothalamus. And I know I got real nerdy with y'all right here, so I hope you guys have been able to keep up with everything that we've been discussing in this segment, because I think it's really important to truly understand from the originator, the creator himself, how exactly this concept came about, since weighted blankets have been, rising in popularity as of late. So I think it's just really not just interesting, but I think it's also just important to understand the why and the how behind how this business, how this concept even came about, and what's the science behind weighted blankets and how it works. So you guys, we're going to cut into a very brief break right now. And when we come back, more on weighted blankets.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. So I know we've discussed already a little bit about who can benefit from using a weighted blanket. And really everybody and anybody can benefit from a weighted blanket. But I want to talk a little more deeply and more descriptive about certain groups of people who can greatly benefit from this product. And I want to first talk about people who have autism. That is really how deep pressure stimulation was tested on, was first really with the autistic community. So they're kind of the reason how and why this all started. And we're going to just discuss, the studied weighted blankets effectiveness for various conditions. And the first one is autism. One of the symptoms of autism, especially in children, is trouble sleeping. In a crossover study from 2014, researchers investigated the effectiveness of weighted blankets for sleep issues related to autism. And the results found there was actually little improvement in sleep scores from the use of the weighted blanket. However, both the children and their parents noted they liked the weighted blanket more despite the lack of improvement. And this is supported by a smaller research study that found the positive benefits of deep pressure therapy in some people with autism. And these benefits may extend to weighted blankets as well. So for autism, it really just depends on the pressure. Next is also for ADHD. There are very few studies that examine the use of weighted blankets for ADHD, but a similar study was performed using weighted vests. In this study, researchers explained that weighted vests have been used in ADHD therapy to improve attention and reduce hyperactive movements. The study found promising results for participants who used the weighted vest during a continuous performance test. And these participants experienced reduction in falling off task, leaving their seat and fidgeting. In addition, further research supports that a weighted ball blanket also has benefits for sleep issues related to ADHD. Another really common condition that people use weighted blankets for is for anxiety. That's actually one of the primary uses of a weighted blanket, and it's for the treatment of anxiety. Past research has shown that deep pressure stimulation can help reduce autonomic arousal. And this arousal is responsible for the symptoms of anxiety, such as increased heart rate, which is what I experience, and very aggressively. In the study above, the researchers found that using a weighted blanket reduced anxiety in roughly 33% of the 32 participants. The researchers also explained that for some of the study participants, lying down may also have helped reduce anxiety. This suggests that using a weighted blanket while lying down may further help reduce anxiety symptoms. Also, weighted blankets are great for insomnia and other sleep disorders. In the 2014 crossover study on autism and weighted blankets, both the parents and children felt the weighted blankets were beneficial in reducing sleep issues. In the ADHD study, using ball blankets, the weighted blanket helped reduce sleep onset time and number of nighttime awakenings in study participants. These study results suggest an overall benefit of using weighted blankets to treat sleep disorders. It's also great for osteoarthritis. There are no research studies on the use of weighted blankets for osteoarthritis. However, one study utilizing massage therapy may provide a link. In this small study, 18 participants with osteoarthritis received massage therapy on their knee for 8 weeks. Study participants noted the massage therapy helped reduce knee pain and improve their quality of life. Massage therapy applies deep pressure to osteoarthritic joints, so it's possible that similar benefits may be experienced when using a weighted blanket. It's also great for chronic pain. One of the recommended at-home treatments for chronic pain is massage therapy. In one small study, researchers found that starting with light pressure, later gradually increasing to moderate pressure, and then using deep pressure during massage therapy may reduce pain reflexes in those with chronic pain conditions. This indicates the extra pressure of a weighted blanket may help keep the legs in place and reduce feelings of pain in chronic pain conditions. And then other medical procedures. There may be some benefit of using weighted blankets during medical procedures. A 2016 study experimented with using weighted blankets on participants and undergoing wisdom tooth extraction. The weighted blanket participants experienced lower anxiety symptoms than the control group. The researchers performed a similar follow-up study on adolescents using a weighted blanket during a molar extraction. And those results also found less anxiety with the use of a weighted blanket. Since medical procedures tend to cause anxiety symptoms like increased heart rate, using weighted blankets may be beneficial in calming those symptoms. So with all of that being said, are there any cons? Are there risks when using a weighted blanket? And there actually are very few risks, for using a weighted blanket. According to manufacturers, weighted blankets shouldn't be used for toddlers under 2 years old, as it may increase the risk of suffocation, which is absolutely true, because I was using a 15-pound and that was starting to feel heavy on my chest. Okay, so I can't even imagine that amount of weight being put on a baby or a toddler. A weighted blanket may also be unsuitable for people with certain conditions, including obstructive sleep apnea, which causes disrupted breathing during sleep, or people with asthma, which can cause difficulty breathing at night, or people who are claustrophobia, which is the tightness of a weighted blanket can trigger that. So here are some tips for choosing the correct weight. As a general rule, a weighted blanket should be 5 to 10% of your body weight. The weighted blanket should also fit snugly to the size of the bed. Adults can use medium-large weighted blankets ranging from 12 to 30 pounds. For a 20 to 70-pound child, a small weighted blanket should weigh from 3 to 8 pounds. For a 30 to 130-pound child, a medium-weighted blanket should weigh from 5 to 15 pounds. And then for older adults, who may want to use small or medium weighted blankets ranging from 5 to 8 pounds. Like I said, mine's 15, so I feel mine's kind of in the okay area. So the bottom line, you guys, weighted blankets are a type of at-home therapy that can provide similar benefits to deep pressure therapy. And these blankets have shown positive results for several conditions, including autism, ADHD, and anxiety. They can help calm a restless body, reduce feelings of anxiety, and improve sleep troubles, which who doesn't want that, right? So when choosing a weighted blanket for yourself, just remember to find a snug size that's around 10% of your body weight, and then you should be good to go. All right? So we're going to cut into a very brief break right now. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more deeply on anti-anxiety routine using a weighted blanket. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast. We are now entering the final segment of today's show, and we're just going to spend a little bit more time talking about how weighted blankets are being used as an anti-anxiety strategy, included an anti-anxiety routine. I'm emphasizing a little bit more on anxiety since, I have it, so I want to talk about it. And I know a lot of other people deal with it as well. So again, the science supporting these gravity blankets. Weighted blankets create deep pressure touch, which is thought to help calm the nervous system of people in states of sensory arousal. This is a theory behind why some children with autism may respond to the use of weighted blankets or vests during moments of sensory overload. The calming benefits of weighted blankets are supported by some research too. One small study tested the effectiveness of weighted blankets in adults in 2006, and the results were staggering. 63% reported lower anxiety after use, and 78% found the weighted blanket an effective calming mechanism. Another study concluded that weighted blankets led to a calmer night's sleep for people with insomnia. However, the small size of these studies and the nature of their design has some sleep experts calling for more studies to scientifically validate claims that gravity blankets or weighted blankets can help with anxiety and sleep. So, getting used to sleeping with a weighted blanket, it's not easy. We mentioned, some people can feel very claustrophobic. Others may feel like they, can't breathe because of the weight of the blanket. And, the bottom line, it just really comes down to making sure that you choose the right weighted blanket for you and making sure it's a slightly larger size than you, but if you toss and turn, you'll still be under the blanket. So there's a lot that goes into buying the proper size, proper weighted blanket size. And for anxiety, I mean, I already told you guys this, that 63% of people have reported lower symptoms of anxiety. And I am part of that 63% because I definitely feel amazing today. I feel well rested. I was able to get a good night's sleep after a few nights of restless nights. So I am very much thankful for my weighted blanket. And I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from those who use a weighted blanket. What is your experience with it? Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Did you notice a difference in your sleep, for better or for worse? Let me know, because you guys already know I love to hear from you guys and love getting your input. So that's going to wrap up today's episode regarding all things gravity blankets, weighted blankets, how it was created, the concept of deep tissue stimulation, and how it mimics the feeling of like a really big hug, cuddling, swaddling, all of that. I literally just talking about it is making me sleepy, and I just can't wait to go back home and snuggle up in my weighted blanket and just have another amazing 8 hours, maybe 9 hours of sleep tonight. If you guys enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff, because that tremendously helps the show. And I'll catch you guys here for the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.